If you've been wanting to launch your podcast for any length of time, but felt stuck on all the small but very important decisions, such as is this a good podcast name? Should I interview this particular guest? What equipment do I need? How will I fit podcasting into my life? And so on, there's something special I have in store for you. It is so great that I even decided to break my own podcasting CTA rule and pop in before the start of the episode, so I'll be super quick. You can have any and all of your podcasting questions answered and get my feedback and advice tailored to you specifically for 2 weeks straight. That's direct one-to-one access for 2 weeks while we build your new podcast together. To grab one of the remaining 4 spots at this price, that'll go up by 40% in the next round, click the first link you see in the show notes, the one that says limited offer and has a little police car light emoji. Okay, thanks for sticking around. Let's get to the episode. Have you noticed something interesting? Whenever a solopreneur says that they're thinking about starting a podcast, the next sentence that comes out of their mouth usually sounds something like this. I just need to figure out who I will have as a guest on my show. Or I'm not sure if a guest I have in mind will even say yes. Or who will listen to my interview show if I'm not a journalist, if I don't have a professional background as a communicator, or something along those lines. As if interviews were the default in the podcasting space. As if a podcast only becomes legitimate once there's another person sitting across you on the other side of the microphone. Today, I want to challenge that assumption head on. This is Say Yes to Podcasting, where solopreneurs learn how to start podcasts that attract their ideal clients and do the marketing for them. I'm your host, Anja Lordanic. Say Yes to Podcasting today. Listen, if you're a coach, consultant, freelancer, service provider, basically any kind of entrepreneur in this day and age, interviews might actually be slowing you down instead of helping you get started in your podcasting journey. Recently, I spoke to a guest on this show, Corinne McKay, and I will link to those episodes in the show notes. And we talked about her approach to podcasting. And what stood out was not a super fancy Hollywood style polished production or celebrity guests or any kind of strategy that involves another person. It was completely the opposite, and we both agreed on this. And trust me, I get the irony because I'm referencing an interview episode I had recently on my show, but hear me out. All of this will make sense. Anyway, Corinne's approach was very simple, and she keeps on proving to herself and to others that simple works. It just does. Solo episodes work. And from now on, I've decided to call it minimum viable podcasting. And we're not talking about cutting corners here. When I mention simplicity and efficiency and effectiveness, we're talking about something smart and something that will actually work for you. And I think more aspiring podcasters need permission to hear that and to implement it. Simple works. Now, here's the problem. When your podcast depends on guests, in the same vein, your consistency suddenly starts depending and continues to depend on everyone else's calendar. And that's not reliable. That means you have to find guests, do the research, you need to pitch them, schedule them, reschedule them from time to time, prepare questions, or at the very least, come up with a rough framework of the conversation, record at a time that works for both of you. And nowadays, a lot of the time, we're recording with guests who live in different time zones than us. And then finally, we have to keep our fingers crossed and hope that they will promote the episode. I don't know about you, but in my opinion, that sounds like a lot of moving parts before you've even published your first episode. And here we're talking about beginner podcasters who believe that interviews are the way to go. I'm not talking about your show not having guests at all. That would be counterintuitive and a bit hypocritical of me to say because I do have guests occasionally on my show and they're amazing and there are ways to streamline the process of having guests over. And recently, I spoke to another guest, Alex Sanfilippo, who is one of the most important voices in the podcasting industry. And he has an entire software dedicated to connecting guests and hosts. And it's called Podmatch. So go to podmatch.com. And I always highly and warmly recommend it to anyone who wants to get connected to either guests for their shows or who wants to be a guest on other people's shows. Anyway, that's a quick side note because that is an extremely helpful software which helped me connect with dozens of such amazing people in the podcasting space. Anyway, moving on. I would now like to focus on a simple and the least amount of friction solo show you can create today yourself. And this is how it can work. And remember, simple works. You have an idea, you connect your microphone or you use whatever microphone you have at hand, you press record, you help someone with your words, with your lessons, with your experience, and that's it. And I know it's not simple. It takes a lot of inner work, a lot of willpower. I get that because I've been there and I'm constantly there all the time. But I just wanted to break this down into simple steps that everything actually comes down to. And here's something else that people rarely talk about. Most aspiring podcasters who run their solo businesses and want to make their podcast a part of their business life, they are not actually afraid of hitting record, which is why I believe a lot of people tend to believe that interviews are the way to go. Most people are afraid of recording alone because that sounds counterintuitive or scary, intimidating, nerve wracking. I get that. And interviews feel safer because someone else is on the other side. We have a human on the other end listening to us, repeating things back to us, answering our questions, and we have this moment of shared responsibility, if you will. And if the conversation doesn't turn out the way you hoped it would, it's not necessarily entirely your fault. And that's comforting. And us humans are wired to look for safety. And solo episodes don't really give you that safety net. But that is exactly why they are so powerful. I'm recording this by myself. I have no one around me. And I feel so comfortable because I've trained myself to feel comfortable in this situation because I'm imagining you on the other end as if we're having an interview, as if I'm mentoring you, teaching you stuff that I know. You're on the other side. And I know you're now doing something else while you're listening to my voice, even though we're recording or communicating asynchronously. But I know you're there on the other end. And I've trained myself to think and to act as if this were a natural situation. And listen, podcasts are flexible. You can train all you want within your four walls, record solo episodes or record solo content by yourself, and no one will ever know how many takes it took you until you share it with them. But the fact is, every solo episode or piece of content teaches you how to communicate your ideas more clearly, how to explain certain concepts, how to share your expertise, how to tell better stories, how to become known for your own voice and style instead of borrowing someone else's. And if your podcast exists to support your business, whose voice should listeners remember or hear the most frequently? That's right, the answer is yours. This doesn't mean that interviews are bad. Far from it. I love interviews, as I already said. I love talking to other experts. I love learning from them, and I love sharing my expertise with them. Interviews are a shortcut to great networking opportunities. They truly do build relationships. And I can say that because for my previous podcast, I had over 80 interviews, I think, with other people. However, having said that, I do not think they should be the foundation of a brand new business podcast. I think your own ideas should be the foundation of your new business podcast. So remember that term we mentioned before, minimum viable podcasting. It has this one simple question in mind. What's the simplest version of this podcast that I can keep doing 6 months from now and still enjoy the process? I actually mentioned this numerous times while I was a guest on other people's shows, and I will keep on repeating it on other people's shows and on this show as well. Podcasting is what you decide podcasting is for you. What does this mean? For example, a weekly 8 minute solo podcast episode will outperform any of the celebrity guests you might have on your show. So please, if you want to launch a podcast that supports your business in the near future, don't ask yourself, who should I invite first onto my show? Instead, try asking this question: what could I teach my listeners this week? Instead of building a podcast around other people's expertise, build a podcast around helping one listener solve one problem at a time, and preferably help them take action after listening to your episode. I know you're very giving, you want to help other people, but with this episode, I'm asking you to be a little bit selfish. Start with yourself, start with one piece of equipment, with one idea, and with one single listener in mind. Start with one single solo podcast episode. And here's another thing that's a bit ironic in this episode. By being a bit selfish this way, using your own voice in your own solo episodes, you're actually getting through to more people and leaving a more powerful and lasting impact on them. Thank you for being here today, listening to my voice, and I will see you next week.